My name is Bradley Danyluk, and this is my case study presentation on the Philadelphia Eagles negotiation with Michael Vick. The negotiation that took place between the Philadelphia Eagles and Michael Vick in 2009 was in regards to signing Michael as a free agent. Shortly after Michael was released from prison, he was given permission to speak with NFL teams seeking his services. According to ESPN 2009, but after serving his time and being released from home confinement July 20th, NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell conditionally lifted Vick's suspension, allowing him to sign with the team. The Philadelphia Eagles were going through their preseason when they negotiated with Vick, which was the perfect time since they had months to evaluate the needs of the team. Michael Vick left prison broke and jobless, therefore he was anxious to get working within the NFL once again. The interests of Michael Vick were quite straightforward. He was recently released from prison with no job and completely broke. At the time, he had already filed for bankruptcy and had millions of dollars in debt. According to ESPN 2009, Vick filed for bankruptcy protection last July, listing assets of about $16 million and debts of more than $20 million. He needed a contract, and he needed it immediately. The Philadelphia Eagles at the time had been a very prominent team within the NFL. They had a streak of playoff appearances and NFC East titles, but the Super Bowl kept eluding them. Andy Reid, the Eagles head coach, had been seeking the missing piece and felt strongly that it might be Michael Vick. All of this was happening during a time frame that was considered the offseason, so transactions taking place within the league are quite common. Therefore, Andy would have been looking at every single available option and not just Michael Vick. As previously mentioned, Michael was in a rather desperate position. He was released from his former team, the Atlanta Falcons, before his sentencing and had no idea if he was going to find work within the league again. After being released from prison and having his NFL suspension lifted, he was allowed to shop his services around to any interested team. Two teams came knocking. They were the Cincinnati Bengals and the Philadelphia Eagles. The Bengals had come right out and offered Michael a 2-year deal worth $2.3 million. The Philadelphia Eagles had a slightly different kind of offer. It was essentially a 1-year contract with an option for a second year pending on performance. The Eagles' needs next offseason and their overall financial availability. The first year was going to be worth $1.6 million, and the second year would be worth $5.2 million. Also, there were a total of $3 million extras in incentives and bonuses that he could earn over the stretch of those 2 years. The Eagles' offer had more stipulations than his other offer from the Bengals did, but there was much more to gain by signing with the Eagles. Also, the Eagles were aware that Cincinnati and they were the only other teams to offer Michael a contract. However, the Eagles' contract did come with immediate and obvious downsides for Vick. Even though Michael had been removed from the NFL since 2006, he was still coming off amazing numbers and his style was incredibly rare. Michael wanted to eventually be a starting quarterback again. With that in mind, he looked at both of the interested teams. The Eagles had 3 quarterbacks when they offered Michael that contract. Donovan McNabb was their veteran starter who had been leading the Eagles to consistent NFC East title appearances. On the bench behind McNabb were Kevin Kolb and A.J. Feely, both of whom were proven backups. If Michael signed with the Eagles, he would definitely not be their starter, especially since McNabb had been recently given a new contract from Philadelphia. However, their recent success was a sign that he could be part of a winning franchise. Cincinnati struggled to gain any sort of momentum within their franchise, and they also draft poorly every offseason. If Michael signed with Cincinnati, it would all but guarantee that Michael would be their starting quarterback at some point that season. If things panned out, they might be able to form the team around his skill set and turn the franchise around with effective drafts. Michael had 2 options to weigh. They were either to take much less money with Cincinnati and have the opportunity to eventually start at quarterback with a struggling franchise, or take a slightly risky but highly profitable contract with the Eagles and hope to see some playing time here and there. His sponsorships were gone, so he wasn't able to rely on any sort of residual money outside of his athletic talent. According to Jay Molman, 2007, Mr. Vick, who was paid an estimated $7 million endorsements last year, according to Sports Illustrated, had lost other deals since the charges. Airtran did not renew its deal to keep the athlete as pitchman, a role he's held since 2004. The Eagles were in a fairly interesting position themselves since they were dealing with the morality of their business decisions. There were countless groups, citizens, and media-based productions that were criminalizing the Philadelphia Eagles for even associating with Michael Vick. The Eagles' management was faced with a potentially profitable and highly marketable acquisition, but have to handle the massive heat coming from the community. However, Michael had been doing everything he possibly could to get back in the good graces of society. According to Alan Barra, 2011, Vick had said the right things and appeared sincere in his regret. He hasn't had so much as a parking violation on his public record and has worked overtime, well beyond the community service requirements of his probation, speaking to high school kids and even making appearances with the president of the U.S. Humane Society. Core concepts. First one for me is appreciation. Appreciation was met on both sides. Michael Vick brought a lot of concerns and needs to the table, and all of them were accepted, understood, and handled in an amicable manner. There were also shared concerns about the public image of the team and Vick. Both sides had done their research and necessary groundwork to show that this was not a bad decision. Michael had been doing a lot of community work, charity work, and general damage control for a while at this point. Michael would not want to be employed by a team that wouldn't stand behind him in a public situation. On the other side, the Eagles would not want to sign a high-profile athlete that has the history that Vick does if they weren't prepared to manage the media. The groundwork was validated with one another, and a mutual feeling of validation and appreciation was maintained throughout the entire negotiation. Core concept number 2, affiliation. The Eagles had a very unique and intriguing plan for Michael if he were to sign with them. As mentioned above, the Eagles were not necessarily in need of a quarterback, however, they were in need of offensive weapons. With the rare football talent that Vick has, Andy Reid was able to initially offer Michael a very involved role in their offense. Most backup quarterbacks stand on the sideline every single game and never get to see any game time, which is exactly what Michael wanted to avoid. Reid found ways to incorporate Vick into their into their offense on a regular basis. This was a great way to make Michael feel like he was really part of the team and contributing to the score every single week. Last core concept is mutual benefit. The mutual benefit that this signing brought with it was huge. The Eagles signed one of the most magnetic and flashy athletes in the history of the NFL. They also handled the controversial issue of this signing incredibly well, so they were able to maximize the marketability of this deal. Michael received a nice one-year contract with an option for a lucrative second year. This was exactly what he needed in order to start paying himself out of debt, providing for his family, and to restart his professional football career. Furthermore, Michael signed with a very respectful team that has done an amazing thing by giving him a second chance to do what he loves. What went well and what went wrong? Overall, I would say that this negotiation went very, very well. During his incarceration, Tony Dungy closely mentored Michael Vick. Mr. Dungy is a former NFL coach and highly regarded as one of the top characters in the sports industry. His vouching for Vick went a long way with the owner of the Eagles, Jeffrey Lurie, and the rest of their management. Furthermore, Michael had been involved with charities, animal rights groups, and the Humane Society since being released from prison. According to ESPN 2009, "I'm a believer that as long as people go through the right process, they deserve a second chance," Eagles coach Andy Reid said. He's got great people on his side. There isn't a finer purser than Tony Dungy. He's proven he's on the right track. This was an instrumental piece of information that helped both sides agree to a deal. This showed that the Eagles had done all of their research before offering Michael a contract, and also that Michael had been on a complete path of change since being incarcerated. Both sides handled negotiation with class and optimism. For what went wrong? Regardless of how well the Eagles handled this controversial signing, there are still many sports fans, Philadelphians, and animal lovers all over the country that will forever disassociate themselves from this team. Even though the Eagles entered into a financially low-risk deal with Vick, they still forever sacrificed a certain amount of fan revenue that they will never be able to calculate. As I mentioned, the Eagles were looking for a missing key to their offense to help propel them to a Super Bowl win. They perhaps could have found this solution elsewhere, but instead they chose to sign Vick. Even if the Eagles had not come to an agreement with Vick, their reputation is forever tarnished for many people. What Andy and the Eagles could have done was to perhaps negotiate with a handful of other offensive free agents in the league and come to no agreements before signing Michael to show that they had tried to fill that role, as opposed to just jumping on Michael Vick as soon as he was available. The Eagles and Michael Vick signed a one-year, $1.6 million contract with an option for a second year worth $5.2 million. There are also incentives and bonuses totaling $3 million extra that Vick could earn throughout those 2 years. This contract was signed in the middle of the 2009-2010 four-game preseason, and there was a high chance that Michael could see preseason game time since this deal was reached so quickly. This is an ideal situation since Michael is coming back to the NFL after being away for over 2 seasons. This will foster a meaningful and long-term relationship, and it did. Michael played well throughout his first season and also during the following offseason that the Eagles traded their starting quarterback McNabb to the Washington Redskins. By week 4 of the 2010-2011 regular season, Michael Vick was named the Eagles starting quarterback. During the following offseason, Michael signed a 6-year, $100 million extension with the Philadelphia Eagles. This relationship has continued to grow from the day they met to negotiate. Michael is a beloved athlete within Philadelphia and has done countless amounts of charity and community work. This is my references slide. And I see that I am slightly past my time limit, so I'm going to stop right now.